Alright, we are back with some more Higurashi. Last episode, Tomoe had her breakthrough. Very cool with the help of Madota, inadvertently, giving her hints that the father was investigating two airlines, which in modern day, well, I think actually when he died, merged into one. So that will probably give her hints for her investigation. But yeah, let's just see where we go from there. The man parted the bangs from his forehead that was so sweaty it seemed drenched by rain, despite the sunny weather, as he rushed into the floor of the First Division. Then, with a fearless, challenging smile, he pulled a business card from his inside pocket and handed it to Tomoe. Who this? Oh, Sorimachi. This is, I know we know this name. This is the I guess the dad of the person who marries Miyuki. And him and Natasaka are friends, I think. I remember that because we had this whole kerfuddle when they mentioned Sorimachi before too, and I'm like, it took me a while, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's Miyuki's new name. After lightly bowing her head, Tomoe glanced at the title on the business card. Chief Public Prosecutor. He seemed a little older than her, probably mid-30s. His physique was neat enough to look like a model, and he looked a little frivolous, but she could tell from the sharp look in his eyes that he was a capable man. Something about the name Tokyo District Prosecutor Office made Tomoe uncomfortable. Well, we know he's a good guy, actually, so I'm not worried. There should have been someone from Nagoya DPO appointed here. There was no reason to dispatch someone from a completely different department in Tokyo, and it was even more odd that they sent a single person in advance. The badge looked real, but who was this so-called Prosecutor Sorimachi? Again, if I didn't remember who Sorimachi was, I also would be sussed.
ご用件はなあ、その前にちょっと失礼します。
After saying that, Sorimachi took off his suit jacket. His shirt was wet enough for his skin to show through. The smell of sweat came overflowing through the damp air, and Madoka, standing beside her, made no attempt to hide the grimace on her face. Sweaty boy.
ちょっとタクシーの冷房が壊れてたもんで暑くってにしてもここって結構市街から離れていますね。不便じゃありませんか？東京のようにあっちこっち電車や地下鉄が走っているわけではないので。
That's why Tokyo is based, as someone who is a transit enjoyer. Still mad at Toronto when a couple years ago Japan was like, hey, we heard you need some help with your transit infrastructure, want our help? And they're like, nah, we got this. And guess what? It's still shit. And Japan's still one of the best transit countries in the world, so good one, Toronto. I think it was for Ontario, but whatever.
いやいや、全くのアポなし飛び込みです。数時間前に新幹線に飛び乗ってタクシー飛ばして飯を食ってる暇もなかった。ですが、どうやら間に合ったようですね。アポがない。それってどういう？
Her words were interrupted by the ringing desk phone. Since Madoka was nearby, she went to answer it after the first ring. However, as soon as she heard the caller's name, she shouted, huh? And then immediately pressed the hold button and turned to Tomoe.
お姉ちゃん、名古屋地検の特捜部の人から3番だけど。
Tomoe looked confused and turned towards Sorimachi, but he had a slight smile on his face and held his hand up as he said, please go ahead. Tomoe had no choice but to lift the handset and press the flashing button number 3. Before she could say a word, the caller identified himself as a Nagoya district prosecutor.
途中の道が混んでいたために遅れましたが、我々はあと30分ほどでそちらに到着できそうです。資料のご準備の方はいかがでしょうか？
ええ。こちらも今、県警と署の捜査員が総がかりになって準備しておりますので、到着された頃にはあまりお待たせすることなくお渡しできるかと思います。目録も添付しておりますので、そちらをご覧いただけましたら幸いです。
そうですか、ありがとうございます。今回の捜査令状は私の方で持参しておりますが、それをどちらにお渡しすればよろしいか教えていただけますか？
署の第一会議室で県警捜査一課の堂島課長が指揮を執っております。その者が今回の責任者なので、彼にご提出ください。
了解しました。
He has an NPC voice, so you know he's sussy.
それでは。
Because they use like there's like 10 actors that do all the background voices. You can tell, because this is like definitely one of the otaku voices. After confirming that caller had hung up, Tomoe sat down the receiver. Then she turned back to Sorimachi, who put out a fan at some point to cool himself off.
東京地検の方いらっしゃいましたね。令状はお持ちでしょうか？
ありません。
はい。
いや、実はあなた方が有力な情報をつかんだことをほんの数時間前に知りまして、そのため令状を裁判所に請求している暇もありませんでした。
Forgot Fujita was in the room. Here we go. Now we got the chill music. Because if it was a spy or something, he wouldn't be so ill-prepared, right? That brazen attitude made Fujita cry out in shock. Without a warrant, they had no obligation to submit investigation materials, and could even refuse requests, so it's time had sent him on the police force to only hand over necessary materials after being presented legally binding proof. And yet, this man didn't have that? Tomoe was feeling more and more suspicious of Sorimachi, and she was starting to regret him in without vetting him properly.
令状をお持ちでなければ、お役所的な対応で申し訳ありませんが、その提示をいただいた上で資料の引き渡しを行わせていただきます。これも規則ですので、ご理解ください。
まあ、そうお答えになるだろうとは思っておりました。ですがこれはどちらかというとあなた方のご好意に頼った。よって私のことが信用できないとおっしゃるようであれば、お断りになられても仕方ないと覚悟しております。
はあ。
Then Tomoe seriously considered declining him immediately, but she thought it would be a pity to do that to someone who came all the way here from Tokyo, so Tomoe blinked and gave him a vague answer. Still though, no matter what this guy's title may be, how could she trust someone enough to hand over investigation materials when he suddenly shows up unannounced and without a warrant?
そもそもどうして東京地検のあなたが私たちの捜査情報をお知りになったのですか？
名古屋地検にも我々のアンテナ役が何人かおりましてね。その中の一人が今回の上司の意向に対して賛同できないと言ってこちらに情報を垂れ込んでくれたわけです。
それならば名古屋地検を通じて資料をご覧になるべきじゃないでしょうか。今回我々は名古屋さんからの協力要請を受けて資料をご提供するのです。それを横取りするようにライン外の東京地検さんが出張ってくるのはまるで派閥争いというか仲間割れのようにしか見えませんよ。
Fujita's suspicion hit his limit, so he interrupted the two of them to reproach Sorimachi. In response, Sorimachi gave him an affirming nod as he pulled up an empty chair and sat down.
おっしゃる通り、同じ検察庁同士で手柄争いをしている。 そう取られても仕方がないことを私は申し上げています。それにこのことが露見すれば名古屋さんから抗議が来るかもしれない。だがそうも言っていられない都合がこちらにもありましてね。無茶を承知で割り込ませていただいたわけです。
その都合とは一体何ですか？差し支えなければ教えていただけるとありがたいです。
名古屋地検から来る連中、千葉の紐付きですよ。
Boom, see? Sussy. Sorimachi suddenly dropped his voice, and he said that, causing Tomoe and the others to gasp and open their eyes wide. Then his smile vanished, and he looked around the room. First at Fujita, then at Madoka, then back to Tomoe and gave her a signal.
この二人は信用できるのか。そういうことか。
Oh, they can definitely be trusted. My boy Fujita would never betray. Tomoe picked up on Sorimachi's implication and gave him a firm nod. After receiving that, he leaned forward and continued.
もうあまり時間もないので腹を割ってお話しします。どうやらあなた方は検察の連中に資料を渡してあとはお任せする心づもりなのかもしれません。しかし名古屋にはもう千葉の息のかかった奴らの手が回っています。ですからあなたたちは資料のコピーを渡して原本は残しておきたいとお考えでしょうが、連中は上の命令を盾にしてそれも回収するつもりです。
Smart.
それこそ根こそぎでね。それに名古屋さんは適度なラインで事を収める気でいます。残念ですがあなた方が期待する結果にはならないでしょう。
適度なラインということは千葉の逮捕までいかないってことですか？
そうです。あなた方が確保した秘書の塚田、それに問題のありそうな企業と観光庁の担当者を何人か挙げて贈収賄容疑とかでとっ捕まえる。
They're using it as an excuse to clean up some troublesome people and leave the main source of the corruption in.
それが彼らの妥協点でしょう。薬事法違反の絡みで厚生省の麻薬取締部の動きも気になりますが、聞いたところによると現状有力な証拠をつかむまでには至っていないようですから、おそらくそして親玉への追及は政治的な判断で見送られる予定です。
そんな。
まさかというお気持ちはよくわかります。私だって検事だ。身内の信用を貶めるようなことは言いたくない。ただはっきり言ってこの一件に関わる黒幕連中はそんじょそこらの犯罪グループなんかとは規模も力も違う。追及を逃れるためならルールブックを書き換えてしまうことさえやってのけますよ。
Placid Tokyo. Tomoe was stunned as she listened to Sorimachi's explanation, but at the same time she reconsidered her thoughts. No matter how rotten Akihito Chiba may be, he's still a big-name politician who served as the Minister of Health and Welfare. It would take more than a half-hearted idealism to take him down.
今回あなた方が塚田の自宅から押収した資料からはおそらく千葉への献金、つまり彼の贈収賄に関わる証拠のいくつかが発見されるでしょう。ですがその献金ルートをたどって全てを暴くと、それこそ医薬業界が大パニックに陥ります。どこまでが政治献金でどこからが賄賂なのかの境目が非常に不明確な現状では犯罪の基準点が見出しにくいからです。
In general, pharmaceutical companies in Japan are required to get approval before they can sell newly developed drugs, and the approval process is handled by the Pharmaceutical Affairs Council within the Ministry of Health and Welfare. Companies often pay incentives to doctors, hospitals, and council members who cooperate during the data collection phase. Strictly speaking, that's a bribe, So much like the construction industry, the pharmaceutical industry is commonly regarded as a field rife with undisclosed expenditures.
実際過去のローウェル事件の顛末がそれを証明しています。当時清廉を謳った首相の指示で地検特捜部やらが徹底的に業界内へメスを入れて責任追及を行ったのですが、結果贈収賄を行ったとして逮捕された者は数十人規模になってしまいましたからね。
Presidents, executives, university professors, ministry debut directors, and other managers who could be easily replaced were arrested one after another. Some of these companies went bankrupt or shut down as a result. Additionally, people were shocked to learn that the Ministry of Health and Welfare and a leading pharmaceutical company had gotten caught in a scandal, which heightened public distrust of medicine and contributed to a subsequent economic downturn. On top of that, medical researchers and other industry officials started weighing more emphasis on their well-being, so they became reluctant to develop new drugs or cooperate with others doing so. Thus, it could be said that the Japanese pharmaceutical industry had stalled since the Lowell incident and fallen 20 years behind compared to other developed countries.
結局一番損をしたのは病に苦しんで治療
Excuse
薬
me.
を必要とする患者た
Allergy
ちでした。
season, man. My nose is dying.
おかしな話です。
そうですね。
When she thought about that contradiction, she felt her conviction wavering. The absurdity of doing the right thing, but ultimately hurting weaker, more vulnerable people was something Tomoe couldn't accept.
そして現在政財界において偉くなってる連中はローウェル義国の悪影響に苦しんだ奴らばかりです。だからもしその過去の事例を挙げて今回の未認可薬の問題で騒ぎが大きくなれば同様に副作用的な影響が出てしまうと千葉がそう言って閣僚たちあるいは厚生省の幹部を巧みに説得したとすればどうなります？
Yeah, it would get them nervous. Get them sweating in their boots. There's no need to answer. They wanted to revive the Sintian pharmaceutical industry, so they do everything they could to downplay the case in order to reduce the impact of the aftermath. Thinking about it, she could see it happening. The district prosecutor would limit the bribery charges to Secretary Sukada, and then close the investigation before it could be linked back to any hospitals involved in the transactions. That way, the social impact could be kept under control, and the case of these dangerous drugs would come to an end. And as a result, Shiba himself would be able to evade pursuit.
ある程度は予想していたつもりでしたが、やはりそうなりますか。
状況はよくありません。それに今はまだ総選挙の公示前ですが、いざそれが始まれば代議士である千葉に対しては逮捕どころか調書すらまともに取れなくなる。ですから今しかない。チャンスは本当にあと数日なんです。
Indeed, the House of Representatives general election was coming up soon. Once the process got going, the district prosecutor's office wouldn't be able to investigate the candidates even if they wanted to. In other words, if she truly wanted to expose Chiba's wrongdoings, there was barely any time left. Dojima and the other folks at the investigation HQ understood that, and that's why they pressured the Nagoya DPO to come out here today.
あれ？
When Tomoe heard that, she suddenly noticed something. After everything she heard, arresting Shiba sounded extremely difficult, but Sorimachi was still suggesting it was a possibility. In other words, he understood the social impact this would have, but was still willing to arrest Shiba without stooping to the appeasement mentioned earlier, aka base justice is unwavering. And because of that, she could definitely understand why it would be better to hand these records over to Tokyo DPO instead of Nagoya DPO. But she didn't understand his motive for taking such a risk to pursue Chiba.
わかりません。社会的不安を煽ることになると分かっていながら、あえて東京地検さんが千葉を逮捕しようとなさるのはなぜですか？
Honestly, I feel like it's probably a culture thing. I think in Canada, I don't think they would care that much about civil unrest, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't really follow real life law stuff that much, but I feel like they'd be happy to take down high government officials in Canada because that's had big game targets. But I know Japan's culture is very different, so.
あなた方の上層部もできれば影響をミニマムに加えたいと考えるのが自然だと思いますが。
ええ、おそらく上はね。実際ローウェル社の捜査も千葉明彦に対しての追及もやりすぎだと。
Too far! How dare you investigate this really corrupt motherfucker.
俺たちはそれが我慢ならんのですよ。不正を明らかに働いているのを目にしておきながら、もっともらしい後付けの理屈で見逃そうとするその根性がね。
Maybe Sorimachi's throat had gotten dry from all that talking, because he started lightly coughing right then. And Tomoe saw that, she grabbed one of Fujita's cans of coffees and held it out to him.
ああ、どうも。まあ、それはともかくとして、俺たちはローウェル社の件をはじめ、莫大な国費を浪費して収賄につぎ込んだアルファベットプロジェクトにまつわる不正の数々を、これ調べれば調べるほど笑いましたよ。その研究会ではもっともらしい綺麗な建前を振りかざしていましたが、実は単なる連中の懐を超え太らせていくだけのものだったわけで、ぶっ飛ばそんな土下座どもに一泡吹かせてやりたくて、俺たちはここ何年もの間心血を注いできたんです。
After saying that, Sorimachi swiftly took a drink from his can of coffee, then squeezed his hand so tight his nails dug into the can. He was carefully choosing his words to avoid leaking information, but the tone alone was enough to convey his heated emotions.
頭は悪くない。それにまんざら嘘をついているわけでもなさそうだ。
Though Tomoe's facial expressions hadn't changed, Sorimachi still felt a slight something in her response. He let the name of the alphabet project slip out because he wanted to see how much they'd been able to grasp thus far. And he was starting to think that this female chief inspector, who he originally thought was nothing more than a clerk, was actually someone he could rely on.
なるほど。このお嬢さんは知っているな。
He was prepared from the start to die on the battlefield here and intended to launch an assault regardless of the odds. So he was willing to bluff if it would allow him to snatch victory, and Sorimachi came to Kakuchi Station running on those desperate feelings. But this girl understood the circumstances and could possibly be convinced to help. With that in mind, he decided to continue.
アルファベットプロジェクトを動かしている連中は、強大な富と権力を欲しいままにして悪辣な事業に手を染めている。このままだとさらに数多くの犠牲者が出て、それこそ汚染の範囲は国内全域にまで広がっていくでしょう。確かにローウェル事件の時のような衝撃を再び起こすのは危険ですが、だったらプロジェクト自身をぶっ潰してしまえばいい。それを実現するためにも中心人物である千葉の逮捕が必要。大手術をやるべきなんですよ。
確かにそうですね。
Molly put the tab on her can of coffee as she voiced her agreement. The tension was suffocating and her throat felt dry.
みないさん。
お姉ちゃん。
Meanwhile, Fujita and Madoto were behind her, turning to her with inquisitive looks in their eyes. Tomoe noticed them, but she held up a hand and said later, then turned back towards Sorimachi. She felt sorry that they were feeling left behind, but at that moment she couldn't afford to waste any time stopping to explain the situation to them.
しかし、反町さん。今回の捜査資料が不正を改善するためにどれほどの効果をもたらすものか、正直言って未知数なのです。ですから気分を害されるかもしれませんが、あなた自身の勝手な独断で妙な期待を持ってこちらにいらっしゃったのなら、いささか勇み足かと私にはそう感じられます。
ほう。
またあまりに大手術になると逆に患者自身の体を傷つけ、命も危険に陥ることになる。
Oh, the risk of surgery?
そう思って軟着陸を試みよう
Sometimes you have
とす
to
る
take
の
the
は
risk.
検察庁のお偉いさん。国家の安定を第一に考える立場の人間としては当然の理屈だと思います。
本心で言っているとは思えませんね。
Sorimachi's gaze became even sharper as he looked straight at Tomoe. Time was running out, so he couldn't afford to squander another moment. His voice grew an insecure edge to it.
この国は上に行けば行くほどいびつで事なかれ主義が強くなります。だから大手術に耐えきれないと分かったらすぐ傷口を閉じてなかったことにしてしまう。それで患者自身の生命力が衰え、やがて朽ち果ててもリスクを負って万一失敗した時、その責めを一身に浴びることの方を嫌い恐れる。
おっしゃる通りです。
ただその体自身が政治家本人のものだったら。だがこの場合体ってのはこの国で、その所有者は国民なんです。そして我々検事は彼らから税金をもらって今の地位について汚職や不正を取り締まる職務を負っている。なのにその俺たちがその国民の利益よりも好き勝手に振る舞う政治家連中のへりくつと建前を守るなんて、まるで犯罪者と警察が共謀するようなものじゃないですか。俺はそれが一番納得できないんです。
It would be a shame to intentionally overlook wrongdoing just because of the major side effects it would cause, even when you realize absolute integrity is only an ideal, just as dies when you permit the darkness a foothold. In that sense, Sorimachi seemed like a man with a lot of self-respect and responsibility for his duties, and he seemed to have a strong conviction in every word he said, so she got a good feeling from him.
だけどどうする。
Deal or no deal? Take the deal? Flachi. I guess this would be the no deal, since the deal is a safe route, right? If Nagoya DPO really is what Sorimachi says it is, then she needed to cooperate with Tokyo DPO to catch the mastermind behind the incident. But, to borrow Sorimachi's words, there was a great ideal of risk in accepting his request here. Could she really set that aside and trust this man? Tomoe was still hesitating to come to a decision.
と時間もないのに脱線してすみません。
Yeah, we are running out of time. The Nagoya guy is gonna be here soon.
でいかがです？
あなたのお考えはよくわかります。ですが、だからといってあなたが信用に足る方だという証拠はどこにあります？単にあなたの暴走で思いついたことに振り回されるというのであれば、これほどの道化はありません。
Tomoe looked down at the business card that Sorimachi had given her. He had more backbone than she first thought, and he did make a good impression, but whether that was enough for her to trust him was another matter entirely. True, I guess he should definitely confirm that he's actually not just bluffing. Plus, there's still a chance that Nagoya DPO would take it seriously and pursue the culprit, and this Sorimachi guy could very well be all bark and no bite. Or worse, he could be an enemy agent here to steal resources and her colleagues, or steal the resources Tomoe and her colleagues obtained. I mean, to be fair, Hanada was very not sussy, unless you're me, a genius. So I can see the apprehension of not just trusting the guy based on a character analysis. Get some hard proof here.
それにこんな名刺一つで正式な令状を持つ彼らよりもあなたに任せろとでも言うのですか？我々もこの資料を作り上げるためにそれこそ血を流すような思いを重ねてたくさんの人たちに力添えをしてもらってきた。そんな彼らに対して私も責任があります。
無茶を言っているのは承知の上です。残念ながら正式な証拠もあなた方が信用できる材料を集めている暇もなく私はここまで来た。ただ先ほども申し上げました通り時間がない。こう話しているだけでもすでに10分。連中が到着するまであと20分だ。
Actually.
奴らは名古屋さんに全て持ち帰らせてもう大丈夫だと油断するでしょう。そこが最大のチャンスなんです。
Cloudy white handprints emerged on the glass surface of the desk that Sorimachi rested his hands on. His impatience and desperation were as clear as day.
ですが反町さん、あなたもこっち側の人間ならばルールを破ることのリスクと信用を証明することの難しさを知っているはずです。だったら
分かっている。だが彼らがやってくればここにある資料は根こそぎ持っていかれる。そして全ての証拠を持ち去られてしまったら我々にはもう手出しができなくなる。本当に正念場なんですよ、警部さん。政治家や代議士に対しての逮捕権を持っていないあなたたちなら持っていても仕方のない資料だ。特に惜しくもないかもしれない。それでも我々にとっては決戦兵器にも等しい代物なんだ。
Is he bowing? Oh no. Sorimachi's desperate appeal had Tomoe's heart racing. What should she do? Just as he said, there was no time to hesitate. Even now, they still probably had only just enough time to copy and transport the materials. But on what grounds could she trust him? It was just recently that she was betrayed by her own subordinate Hanada, who she thought was trustworthy. That's what I'm saying. I understand the distrust. And this guy isn't even of a sprite, man. That adds an extra layer of distrust. With that in mind, she was doubting her judgment and couldn't bring herself to say yes or no. At least, at the very least, if there was some evidence that could support her decision, she'd be willing to accept the responsibility and take that step.
頼みます、柿内署の警部さん。今からでも責任者にこのことをつないで口利きをしてもっと。
Whoops. That moment. Yeah, he was bowing. Sorimachi bowed so deeply that his suit jacket slipped out of his hands. When Tomoe saw that, she reflexively bent down to catch it, but she accidentally grabbed the bottom, so his wallet spilled from his pocket.
すみません。え？
As Tomoe apologized, she suddenly dropped her gaze downward and noticed the two-fold wallet spread open on the floor. Her eyes stopped on the photo inside. What she saw there was a little boy and a little girl surrounded by greenery and with innocent smiles on their faces.
ああ、すみません。興奮してつい。
And one of those little boy, I think the little boy's Miyuki's future husband. It's crazy to think about.
この子は。
ああ、私の息子です。いや、お恥ずかしい。
After grabbing the suit from Tomoe, Sorimachi somewhat timidly reached for his wallet while scratching his head. But Tomoe picked it up before he could get it and stared at it.
この顔、どこかで。
Of course, she'd never seen Sorimachi's son before, but the girl was holding up a peace sign beside him and it felt like someone she'd seen recently. But where? Oh, that's already Miyuki. And she's remembering Miyuki. I totally forgot, yeah, they were already friends back then. Where on earth did she meet the girl? And they were even joking that they already liked each other. I remember that. That was pretty early in this chapter. Or like in another console arc. She remembered. It was when she went to meet Wishi at Okinomiya Station. There was a girl stretching her arm out in front of the vending machine, struggling to insert a 100-yen coin. And as proof of that, she could clearly see the red spherical hair ornaments on the girl's head in the photo, which meant this girl is...
確か、みゆきちゃん。
ひょっとしてあなた、赤坂と知り合いなんですか？
This will help with credibility, because even though she doesn't fully know Akasaka, she knows Akasaka is trusted by Oishi, so it's like by virtue. Pseudo-credibility. Hearing Tomoe mutter that name, Sorimachi looked up in surprise, and when he responded immediately with the name Akasaka, she knew for certain that her recollection was correct.
反町さん、失礼ですが、赤坂さんとはどういった関係なんですか？
ええ、大学時代の後輩でね。よく家族込みでキャンプに行くんで、これはその時に撮った写真なんですよ。
それだけで？
Sorimachi, feeling a little frustrated, was about to ask why they were having small talk at a time like this. But when he realized how seriously Tomoe was listening to his words, he was quickly able to pick up where this conversation was going. Were the two of them just acquaintances, or did the two of them have a deeply trusting relationship? That's what she was trying to find out here.
ならば。
He's a tier advantage, dude. He didn't know how well acquainted this chief inspector was with his sworn brother. Nevertheless, Sorimachi decided to gamble upon his odds and started talking about Akasaka, hoping it would be enough to win the trust. Good move, good move.
わかりました。赤坂が公安だってことはすでにご存知ですよね。奴は現在外事系、特に国内企業が開発した技術やその情報の流出を防ぐことをメインに行っています。いわゆる産業スパイの活動抑止とその取り締まりです。今回アルファベットプロジェクトで開発された情報が海外に流出しているとの疑いがかかったことを受けて、彼らと共同捜査を行っていました。外資系企業が関わると彼の出番ですからね。ただあいにく最近になって公安がこの件から手を引いてしまったので、今は彼の力を借りることができない状況ですが。
では赤坂さんに身元証明を取り付けることはできませんか？
Got him on speed dial.
今は無理です。彼は現在休暇中なので、おそらく今頃は家族旅行に出ているはずです。和倉温泉がその行き先と聞いていましたが。
She thought back. Indeed, when she met Akasaka at the Okinomiya station, he mentioned that a major case he was investigating had been suspended, so he was using that time for a family vacation.
和倉温泉に行く途中に立ち寄らせていただきました。
Damn, she even remembered Wakura.
お元気ですか、大石さん。
Akasaka said that.
残念ですよ。私としてはぜひとも捕まえたかったんですがね。
まあまあ、赤坂さんでも無理だったのなら 他の誰にもできませんでしたよ。元気出してほら。
The stories really did match up. At the time, Oishi said that Akasaka was an excellent detective. He even encouraged Tomoe to be a detective like him. This man named Akasaka was capable enough detective to win that old man's trust and respect. And the prosecutor standing in front of her was close enough to him to be just like family, and was even collaborating with him on an investigation just recently. Come on, that's confirmation he's credible.
藤田君、それと窓か。
はい。
何お姉ちゃん。
こっち側の段ボール箱を全部大至急で地下のメールセンターに運んで。
Choosing our sides.
反町さん、送付先の住所はこちらの名刺のものでよろしいですか？
え、あ、はい。
Oh my god, this song. Is this like an opening? Turned instrumental, I think. Metal version.
今井さん、いいんですか？これってあなたの。
責任は私が取る。
Screw the Nagoya. But what are they called? PDOs? Even though, okay, that sounded weird. They're not called PDOs. Never mind, I take that back. Even though I respect Nagoya, because that's where my dad lives.
悪いけど、言う通りにしてくれる。
We're taking the Sorimachi pill. Tomoe turned to them as she said that, then repeated it to encourage her bewildered colleagues. Madoka sensed something in her sister's expression, and nodded back to her and began setting up the handcart that was leaning against the wall nearby.
わかりました。見ない警部。ほら、藤田さん手伝って。あと10分しかないのよ。
Hide it.
はい。これ全部ですね。よっと。
Then, once all the cardboard boxes were loaded onto the cart, Fujita pushed out of the room with Madoka's help. After seeing them off, Tomoe turned to Sorimachi, who was stunned by the sudden development, and then she smiled as she spoke up.
今2人が運び出した段ボールに入っている資料は残っているこれらのコピーです。私が広報用の資料にして後で整理するつもりで預かっていたものなのですが、薬の成分を分析した予備資料も含めてそのまま東京地検に郵送します。
Just DPO, okay. PDO sounds a lot worse.
印刷している時間はもうありませんので。
Also, I just realized DPO stands for District Prosecutor's Office, which also makes a lot of sense.
本当によろしいんですか？押しかけておいてなんですが、資料を丸ごと渡していただけるなんて。
Sorimachi team are thinking they'd at best provide him copies of a portion of the material, so he's extremely surprised to hear Tomoe was offering him all of it. He too understood just how valuable this material was, and not to mention she may not be able to avoid formal reprimand for releasing this material to outside parties. There certainly was a huge risk, and she was feeling a little hesitant. This would be very hard to explain to the public relations director and the police secretary later on. And if she allowed Sorimachi to carry the documents out of here, and then he lost them, or worse, if he disposed of them, then Tomoe truly would have lost everything.
だけど
Tomoe believed. She decided she wanted to believe.
必要分の複写が済み次第警察庁広報室に返送してください。私はあなたを信じます。だからどうか役立てていただけますか？
警部さん。
私はたくさんの人たちに支えられて今日まで捜査に当たってきました。自分一人が勝手な理想の中に生きることなく、他の人々も それぞれに正義を持って生きていることを信じて、その心に訴えかけて、ここまで。だからどうかあなたのことも信じさせてください。お願いします。
わかりました。こんな俺を信頼してくれて本当に感謝し、あなたの見る目が正しかったことをしっかりと証明してみせますよ。
Sorimachi-san said that with a smile so big it was about to fly off his face, then deeply bowed to Tomoe. If this really is something Shiba was so afraid of that he hatched a plot to recover it, then we might actually be able to win this. No, we'll definitely win. With those powerful feelings in mind, Sorimachi held out his hand. Tomoe reciprocated and gave him a very firm handshake.
では私はこれでことは一刻を争いますので。
すみません。近くの駅までお送りしますので、少々無駄足になるかもしれませんが、
What the heck?
お手伝いいただきたいことがあるんです。
As she said that, Tomoe reached into her pocket and pulled something out, then held it up to Sorimachi. Sutara had just given it to her a few days ago. It was a key with a number tag attached. Alright, we're gonna end it there though. Happy Tomoe teamed up with Sorimachi, aka it might lead up to an Akasaka team up, which is what we're all waiting for, right? The big 3 police officers getting back together. So thank you for watching and hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time with some more Higurashi. Later.